Okay, so hello, and my name is Lauren Pavlidis. I am the Chief Operating Officer and Mental Health Manager for the Centre of Disability Employment Research and Practice. Today I'm going to be talking to you about social capital and the employment process. Before we begin, a little bit about myself, I guess. My journey started back in 2014 now, majoring in advanced psychology. I moved into a research role with CDERP and then Melbourne University as well. I've also done counselling internship, and years later moved into the mental health manager and COO role for the centre. Now, joining me today, the visiting fellow from Cornell University, Ithaca, New York, and lucky for us, the director for our centre. It's Dr. Peter Smith. You can see him in the video down the bottom there as well. Say hello.
Hello, Lauren. Hello, everyone. Thank you for the more than too formal introduction. I'm actually moderating today, so I'm going to disappear into the background. And if you've got questions, just type them in, and when we get to the Q&A, I'll pass them on to Lauren. If there are anything that needs answering while Lauren's going along, I'll see if I can answer that for you. But welcome, everybody, and enjoy.
Thank you. Thank you. So, as Dr. Smith said, to the right, there is the chat box, so you can pop your questions in there. There'll be time for the questions towards the end. But do try to ask your questions as I'm talking as well, because it's really important to ask the questions in the moment so you don't forget and lose track of what it is that you're hoping to understand more of. You'll also notice to the right that there is a files section. So if you have a look, I've shared some files with you guys. You've got a little bit more information on the Work First programs, our Work First corporations, what Discovery is, and about our CDERP College. And there's also a coupon for a free overview. So the program overview for today is the discovery process and social capital. I'm going to explain further how the two link in together. So if you bear with me throughout my talk, you'll be able to see how they interrelate and where the linkages are, and I'll explain that in more detail as we go along. Next, I'll talk about social capital and the individual, its impact on employment, methods to enhance social networks, and working with families. After I've gone through all of this information, then we'll move on to the questions. So you can save your questions towards the end. I'll try to answer them as best as possible. We'll also provide our contact details. So if you have any other questions afterwards that you think of you'd like to send through, more than welcome to contact us. And then we'll also give you an overview of CDERP and what we do, the Work First individual employment, and our podcasts, webinars, and courses. Okay, so let's get into it. What is the discovery process? Okay, so the discovery process is a series of stages designed to capture and record the major events of which make up a person. So using the discovery staging record, which some of you may know about discovery, some of you may not, but I'll try to explain it as best as I can. Certified customized employment staff will establish how tasks are typically performed, any accommodations, technology, supports, or specialised training strategies that should be employed. So discovery is made up of 4 key stages. Okay, so the first stage, getting to know the client. So this one, it's about that initial contact. It's gathering information already known. It's visiting the home, speaking with the client and their family, the people who know your person best. What are their interests, their hobbies, their routines, things we need to consider. Visiting the person's neighbourhood, public transport, local shops, their community involvement, which this is going to be really crucial when it comes to the social capital, establishing a person's environment. So all of these factors working together. Friends and neighbours visit, go with the client, watch them interact, identify their connections. Again, that's going to be really crucial for your social capital. I'll explain that further as we go along. You'll start to see how it's linking in together then. So the second stage, understanding the client and their career. So this is giving context to the client's interests, their talents, and their skills. So this is about those informational interviews. What does this role entail? Utilize the person's social capital, which I'll explain that further shortly. Work experiences, opportunities to create new connections, or using a person's social capital. These work experiences, they only need to be about 3 hours at a time. They don't have to be anything huge. It's really just about putting that person into that space, observing them in that space, looking at how they're connecting with others, their behaviour, if they're comfortable in that environment, observing the skills that they already have. Does it make sense here? I mean, there's a lot more detail that goes into it, but I'm just going to give you this short brief on it today. If you want to know more about discovery, we do have that in our CDERP college. We can talk about that at the end. So in stage 2, it's really important to take some time to reflect and plan. Get all the information you need for your client to make an informed decision. And this is where you start to see those vocational themes and the patterns emerging. Stage 3 is your vocational themes and your profile. So what are our person's themes? Themes bring together our tasks, our interests, our talents, and our skills. These are all the things that we've observed. Identify places where people with similar themes work. So this is where your social capital will come in. You'll be able to exercise that a bit and see where it will take you. Okay, informational interviews and work experiences. We have identified the themes. Work experiences will help determine the best fit, and again, broadening our connections, strengthening social capital, writing our vocational profile, the person's narrative, the best ecological fit, ideal conditions of employment, supporting roles, producing a plan that works with the person's social aspects of their life. So this is really important. The hours that suit, how will they get there? The vocational profile is about highlighting those concrete skills, tasks, and potential contributions to a workplace. Okay, so stage 4, this is your job and business development plan. So this is the career planning process, places where our vocational themes work, informational interviews, connecting with those places, businesses, having discussions, getting to know their business. And again, this is where your social capital can come into play. Their needs, does this fit your client and the employer? A win-win situation. So it needs to be good for both sides, not just your employee, but the employer as well. And then you also look at your skill development plan. So you're planning a career, job development should be a part of the discussion. So putting those steps in place so that there is progression. So you're constantly moving forward. So from this particular date, the person will need to start learning a new skill and they'll move in the role. Okay, so now I've covered a little bit about the discovery process. Like I said, I've tried to keep it brief. We'll move into social capital and the individual, and hopefully it'll all start to make sense. So during stage 1 of discovery, you'll visit the home and the neighbourhood of the person. You will speak with the family and significant others that have been identified. From these conversations, you will ask for names, you'll ask for contacts, you'll focus on building social capital at both the individual and the organisational levels. So social capital refers to the collective value of all social networks and the need that arises from these networks to do things for each other. Social capital is an opportunity to leverage knowledge, wealth, and cooperation through collaborative relationships among internal personnel and throughout communities. So it's about mutual benefit and growing trustworthiness. These are all the foundations for strong social capital relations. So social capital, it's all around us at different levels of analysis. For some, it relates to social relationships. For others, it extends to social settings and social structures. Social capital has been conceptualized as a resource. So it's a range of tangible and intangible benefits of sociability, highly interrelated through the micro, meso, and macro levels of sociological analysis. So some of you may know a little bit about sociological analysis. For others, I will explain this in, again, sort of a brief manner because it is quite detailed. And the thing about social capital, it really is about how you view it personally. So it can come in different structures. For some people, it will be relational, some people will be cognitive, and some people it will be structured. Now, I haven't put all of that detail in for you today. If I did that, this would probably be another hours-long webinar. And I think 2 hours is probably too long. Alrighty. So let me give you a bit of a rundown on what I'm talking about when we refer to social capital analysis. So at the micro level, society is made up of individuals. At the meso level is the social relationships. And macro level, society is made up of collective aggregates. So to explain this further and give you a bit of an example of what I'm referring to, at the micro level, the individual holds social capital through their immediate relationship. So this is those one-on-one interactions. So perhaps, you know, your neighbour, that sort of thing. It's one-on-one. It's not out in the community. It's just that one-on-one interaction with another person. You don't have several other people around you informing in this interaction. So this form of social capital can be explained in terms of the individual who picks up the neighbour's groceries from the local market every week, perhaps utilising the individual or micro social capital to gain income or work experience. Now let's take it one step further to the meso level, using an individual's social relationships. So this is our family and friends. For example, the uncle who owns a shop down the street, so he's a shopkeeper. He owns the local grocery store and employs or provides an experience for the individual. Finally, at the macro level, which is the community or society, we can view this as the local suppliers, so who provide the local grocer with products or services that the individual may not be connected with, but the uncle can provide that bridge or link between. So when we're viewing social capital at these varying levels, a good way of trying to understand it is looking at it from your own perspective. So on my one-on-one level, perhaps I have an interaction with my boss. And that's a one-on-one. You know, I talk to him all the time and he gives me work. When we move up another level, perhaps we take it one step further and he has a connection with perhaps like someone that he works with. So this can be that person where I don't necessarily know them, but there is that connection that then interrelates us. And then from there, that person may work for an institution. So perhaps they work for the university. And again, that's branching out. So it's all about looking at your structure and how you continuously branch and link everything together. So I find that sometimes when people start talking to families and getting to know them, they'll say, oh, this person doesn't really have a lot of family and friends, so how am I going to build on their social capital? Well, that's the thing with family and friends. They know someone as well, who then in turn knows someone. Most of the family and friends, they'll have a job, a role of some kind, even if that job or role does not sort of relate to your person. There is obviously a flow-on effect, and they'll know somebody. And, you know, with this day and age, with the internet and everything, everyone seems to know everyone online. So why not spread the social capital? But there is other ways of doing it, and I will get into that shortly. So we're just going to move on to the impact of social capital on employment. So all people have something or some part of something that they can do and enjoy doing. It is our job to see that this spark or personal genius, which is the DPG, the foundation of customised employment, is put to practical and profitable use in order to begin the development of real work and community involvement. So for many people with disabilities, the best place to learn is in environments where the target skills will be utilised. So this is really important because the use of developmental continuum, which continuum is a form of measurement and earning the right to a job or a social activity, it's eliminated based upon the solid evidence that preparatory training has little validity. So it's all about that hands-on approach. So segregated settings are not necessary and are indeed a detriment to teaching and learning. So all people rely upon social networks that assist them in daily life and in times of personal crisis. So people with disabilities who have limited social networks and few friends can benefit from opportunities to participate and exhibit competence in a variety of settings with non-disabled people. So by expanding on a person's community engagement and connections, you are expanding on the individual's opportunities to gain resources. So these resources can have a direct impact on employment, as the more resources available to the individual, the more experience and the more social capital that can be gained. So every time you take a person into an experience, even if it doesn't work out the way that you planned, you need to think about it as an opportunity, as a resource, about gaining an experience, gaining an understanding of a role, what things entailed, and about gaining connections and meeting new people that may actually be of benefit to your person later on. Now, I'm hoping I'm not moving too quickly through these slides, so do tell me if I'm going too quick and I will slow it down for you. And like I said, ask questions over to the right. Don't be afraid to ask those questions. I'm happy to answer anything that you want to know. Okay, so it's our reach into the varying levels of social capital that support our employment journey to help one, not just find employment, but find meaningful employment. And as social capital requires levels of trust and benefit, the passion produced from having meaningful employment creates a higher likelihood of the employment being mutually beneficial for both the employee and the employer, supporting the longevity of the role. So that's the thing. When we're looking at employment, having that meaningful employment, it really strengthens that social capital. It strengthens those relationships As you know, when you're passionate about something, you work with others that have similar passions. The work that you produce is obviously, it's a lot stronger, it's of higher quality, and the relationships that come out of it are a lot stronger as well. There's less likelihood of having behavioral issues or anything that sort of comes along there. And there'll also be more of an openness. And it's that open communication that makes a big difference when it comes to employers. So methods to enhance social capital. Mentorship and social networks are important aspects of career building, isn't it? It's so important. Most people don't realize that they actually have a mentor. It's somebody that provides you with a bit of insight, a bit of information, understanding your role, giving you guidance. These people are so crucial when it comes to employment. I'll explain to you a little bit about the social capital and how it relates in with mentorship, and then I'll explain the linkage between the two. So when individuals initially meet as a result of a common interest, they are already well on the way to building a relationship. So that's that passion, that interest. Linking the job seeker based on vocational themes, educational and interest groups, as well as creating mentorship opportunities can be invaluable outcomes of discovery, job search, and job development. So mentors working in positions that fall within the vocational themes of a job seeker can provide valuable knowledge about work, job tasks, skills needed, ideas, business leads, and insight into where the job seeker's skills would be a good fit. Now, I just want to say, when it comes to mentors, it doesn't have to necessarily be someone that you know in the immediate family or in your immediate social network. It can be someone that you spread out to. And again, like I said previously, it's on those varying levels. So it's about working past those levels and spreading your networks. And you can do that for a person with a disability as well, even if, they only have a small group around them. When you're taking them into these new environments, that's when they start to build on that social capital, and you'll start to realize that there is a possibility of having a mentor there. Now, the mentor may not necessarily give that person a job. That's not what a mentorship is about. A mentorship is about setting an example, and it's about providing guidance and providing opportunities as well. So many opportunities exist for developing trust and connections within the community. People engage around commonalities, and others who share a real interest or even a passion for something are often willing to talk about it with others and maybe even teach them a few things. Often people with developmental disabilities can benefit from a mentor, helping them to get started with an experience. Whenever possible, the mentor should be someone who also shares that interest, or someone who is valid in that environment. So somebody who fits in well in that particular group or community. Clearly, this is not always possible from the outset, in which case a trusted friend or family member can help the person get started, taking them to meetups, helping them meet people and get conversations started. The family member could do some subtle modeling of how to talk to the person and treat them in an age-appropriate way, and then back off and let things begin to develop naturally. So in many cases, a mentor emerges from the group and the person can engage more independently. So your initial mentor doesn't always end up being the one that takes them all the way through. Sometimes it's just about modeling that appropriate behavior within a community and giving that person an opportunity to then become self-determined and independent in their position and taking control of the networks that they then start to form. And, you know, a really good example for myself as well, you know, using my own social capital, I'm able to tap into numerous different resources for the clients that I work with. And, you know, not everyone's going to have the same sort of resources, but like I said previously, these days with the internet, it's actually quite, I guess you'd say, a unique way to connect with people, but it does work. And most people do actually intrinsically want to help others. You know, if it's as simple as providing a bit of information about who they can contact, or, you know, the way that a person could develop their career and what steps that they need to take to get to the place of where they want to be. So it's really good to be able to build on that social capital and see what information you can gather from people in your networks. And you might be surprised at what you actually find out. It's a lot of people, you know, you think that you really know them, but then once you actually start having a conversation with them, you find out that perhaps, you know, their partner works in a completely different sector and they know a whole heap of people, and you go, oh, wow, that's actually perfect. But you wouldn't have known that unless you actually exercise that social capital and exercise that relationship. And, you know, that person was willing to give you that information. You know, it's very easy for a person to sort of turn around and go, hey, I do actually know someone now that we're having this conversation. So it really is about getting out there and just having discussions and approaching people and building those relationships. So ways in which people enhance opportunities for social capital. So these were some of my examples that I was talking about before. So working and work experiences, again, a really good way to begin those relationships and a really good way to see whether or not an environment will make sense for your person, and if their skills work in with that particular environment. It's also a good way to extend that social capital, have those discussions, and see if perhaps there is another step that you can take it. So perhaps that initial environment that you put that person into, they then say, look, this person doesn't suit this particular role, but when you break down the skill set that they do have, it is quite suitable for one of our suppliers who provides us with a product that we use here. So that's exercising that social capital, and it's taking it into those varying levels. Volunteering at events or for charities. So this is a really good one. It's about getting out in the community, and it's about building on that social capital and meeting new people. There is opportunities for volunteering everywhere. So where people tell me that there is no opportunities, possibly they've never actually gone onto a community Facebook page, or they've never walked past a community board, you know, at the shops or something like that. There is always volunteer work around. And again, these are a really great way to extend on that social capital, because volunteering, that's not your end result, unless the person wants that to be for themselves. But if we're talking about employment and we're talking about getting paid, volunteering is a really good way to build on that social capital. You're meeting people who are also volunteering their time. Most likely those people, they have another role, they have a job outside, and they're the people that you can then connect with. And you can find out, what do they do? Why have they chosen to come here? Does that flow on into their employment that they do outside of here? And does that connect with your person? So entertaining family, friends, or neighbours. Again, it really is, you know, about building those resources and spending time with your family and your friends and your neighbours, and finding out what opportunities are around them. And, you know, it's interesting when you actually start talking to people, or you're talking to your neighbours and that kind of thing, and you're thinking about social capital, and then your neighbour says to you, oh, you know, I always need someone to come and do my gardening every week. and then they say to you, you know what, I do actually know someone who has a gardening business. And then it just sort of starts to flow on, and you're sort of thinking, okay, my person has a very strong interest in agriculture. Perhaps we can start them by, doing this neighbour's gardening and see how this sort of unfolds for them. And then we'll think about a mentor, which is a friend of theirs who owns a gardening business, and you can then work into that, perhaps get them some work experience or opportunities, and then exercise those skills further. And then you've also got your proof, and you're saying to yourself, okay, these skills make sense here. This makes sense. What doesn't make sense for them? Okay, maybe it's the environment. These are the sorts of things we have to think about, but it's these opportunities and that social capital that's going to give us that chance to be able to view what makes sense for our person. So participating in your local community events. There's always community events going on. Unfortunately, this year has been a little bit different for a lot of people, so I understand this one is quite tricky. A lot of the events have been cancelled, but hopefully moving into 2021, all of those things will start to happen again, and the community events will be available everywhere. I know normally this time of year you would have the Christmas carols and all that kind of thing, and that stuff would be fantastic for somebody perhaps that has a very strong vocational theme in theatre or music, and just the production of things, all the events that take place in those kinds of community events. So advocating for change or supporting groups who advocate in your community. So this is a really good one too, because these are people who are aligning in that same sort of position as you. They have that strong passion as well, and it's a really good way to start extending on those relationships and building on them. Exercising, joining groups, so for example, walking or engaging in activities such as soccer clubs. For those of you who have boys or girls that love soccer, you probably know that you're doing this weekly, and every time you go there, there's the same people, and you're thinking, okay, maybe I should speak to these people, and you'd be fascinated because you might see someone standing there who's got the big puffer jacket on, they've got the beanie on, and then you start talking to them, and then you find out that, they're running one of the biggest banks or something like that, and you wouldn't even know until you start having these conversations. And again, that's extending on your social capital and creating those relationships. And it's not difficult for that person to turn around and give you that little bit of information. This is what I do for a living. Oh, really? What does that entail? Let's talk about it more. Let's build on our relationship. Okay, so now we're moving on to working with families. Okay, hang on. Hopefully Kathy has been able to get back in. Oh, that's no good, Kathy. It's freezing on you. Okay. I'm hoping the rest of you can hear me just fine. Again, if you're having any issues, please do let us know. Okay, so working with families. Another means of expanding social capital is by building the individual and the family networks by making yourself and the family known to the local community. So doing this requires active participation in activities and events, not just attendance. Given that time is often in short supply with families, it helps to focus on 1 or 2 weekly activities where time is committed. So find ways that the individual can contribute. So places such as church youth groups can be a good starting point if the family is religious. Churches are generally open toward participation. So the key is getting a mentor or a person to guide initial participation, such as a group leader, a person who sets an example of how to participate, finding a way the person can contribute to projects. So, for example, some youth groups hold community fundraisers to help service the community. Chances are there is something the person can do to contribute to those events. So it may not be setting up the tables and chairs. It could be just welcoming people as they arrive at the event and handing out the itinerary. So it really depends. This can be the beginning of a network. Family members can be encouraged to do the same, leveraging on their networks through work and activities. The more people you know, the more resources and connections will lead to opportunities. So families can be your greatest asset, which is very true. As in the majority of families, at least one family member will have employment. And through that network of resources, there is an extension into other networks. If you consider your own employment, who are your suppliers? What are their locations? Who supplies them? These are all things to consider. So when you think about family networks, a really good way to think about it is, for example, it's when I did an informational interview with a young lady who owned a florist. From our conversation, she informed me that her father actually owned a factory nearby and he supplies fruit to the local stores. So that is the beginning of social capital. So when you think about the networks that family have, again, it's just such a flow-on effect. So, you know, that woman who has the florist, she's got lots of opportunities there. Then you've got her father who has the factory. Okay, what goes on in the factory? Then there's the suppliers and they're bringing in all of the fruits, and then he obviously outsources them. They go out to all the different local marts. So it's just flowing on and it's constantly spreading out. And, you know, the example as well with the church is a really good one too, because there's so many different ways that you can view it. It's not just about, you know, participating in the church itself. It's also what other activities are connected to the church. So, you know, some churches may have a care for children or a religious sort of activity for the kids that they go to whilst church is on, that kind of thing. You know, so that's an opportunity there for you to be able to exercise a bit of social capital. Perhaps the person can go in there and they can help out for a day, help take care of the children and see what that's like and see whether or not that's going to make sense for them. And if it does, that's when you can start exploring those opportunities and that experience. And perhaps the person that you're working with says to you that they really love working with kids, and maybe you're thinking to yourself, okay, how is this going to work? How am I going to get them an opportunity at a daycare center or something like that? It's a little bit tricky, but there is a way where it sort of flows on. So perhaps when you go into this church group and they have that care that's going on, the person that runs that care actually has another role where they're working at a center. Now that's your social capital building, and you can say to them, okay, great. Who do you know in your networks? I'm sure that person will be happy to help out. This is that trust that's built in the community. And that person will say to you, okay, you know what? Why don't I introduce you to my manager? And perhaps we can have a conversation. Perhaps there is an opportunity there for some work experience, you know, and they might have your person come in and they'll be there for a few hours, but it'll give them a chance to really exercise their passion and start to find a mentor as well. And that mentor may be someone that works there who then says to them, okay, you know what? You are interested. You've got the skills. Let's start looking at the steps that you need to take. These are the steps that I took to get to this point where I can work with children. You know, we need to start looking at these steps for you. How is this going to work for your career development? Where do we start? Perhaps we're starting with a certificate. How are you going to do the certificate? Could you do the certificate and do some work experience here as well? And I'll mentor you. We'll work together. You know, and people really do get enjoyment out of helping others as well. So, you know, never downplay that. It's a wonderful thing. Okay. Alrighty, so we're up to the questions. Now, I don't see any questions just yet. Feel free to ask questions, everyone, if you have any. I'll give you a moment to think about it. Maybe if Dr. Smith wants to come in here and maybe we can have a conversation, help get the ball rolling.
Sure. I'd like to talk about Oh, you'd like me to start the conversation? Okay.
Yeah, that'd be great. Because it's good to just start the conversation and see how people go. And yeah,
I think it's probably one of the things when you think about social capital, and people think about it as at an individual level. One of the really interesting things about social capital is that by itself, with an individual, it has no currency. It's only when an individual chooses to do something, to act volitionally, they can actually turn their social capital into something that has value. And invariably, one of the outcomes of spending your social capital is that you very quickly move from through the inclusion phase to the cohesion phase, where you then get to expand and work off other people's social capital, because cohesion comes out of institution. So in other words, what you're doing is you're literally expanding your individual capital into institutional capital. So consequently, the pool of social capital that you can draw on or spend, if you want to treat it as a currency, expands exponentially once we support a person through the inclusion phase. So they develop their own social capital or discover the capital they do have, which is quite powerful. It then moves into the phase of cohesion. So in other words, we're taking an individual out of their isolation into the larger community, because it starts to redefine what inclusion is, because inclusion for many years was simply a euphemism for present. In other words, if we took a person with disability into the community, that was considered to be cohesion or social cohesion, because they were in society. Now, I can walk down the street and talk to no one. That doesn't mean I'm a part of society. All right? Cohesion really is using the social capital to create other networks, meaningful networks and purposeful networks that allow you to expand your opportunities. And that's what the employment process is all about. And that's where social capital feeds into employment. Kathy's asked some questions there, Lauren, for you around the vocational profile. How do you find workplaces from the vocational profile or the vocational themes?
Yeah, so it depends on how your vocational theme is defined. If you've gotten to the point where you've developed a theme and then you've broken down the parts of the theme and the roles that you're seeking, it's about going out and finding those opportunities and getting that experience to see whether or not it's actually going to make sense. And you really do need to do your homework first. So what I suggest that you do when you're thinking about your vocational themes is that you go and conduct some informational interviews. So you go and have some discussions. So you find the different places within the range that makes sense for the person. So obviously you don't want them traveling really long distances. It has to be somewhere that is closer to home. When I say closer to home, I'm not saying around the corner, but somewhere where you're not having that really huge sort of driving and following on, because it needs to be a place that they can get to. And that's when you start looking at those different businesses, and then you start making those trips and having those informational interviews. Now, it is important that you learn how to do informational interviews properly, and they do take time, they do take experience. It's going in there and understanding the roles, what it entails. you'd be surprised, most businesses, when you go in and you speak appropriately, you say who you are, why you're there, you're seeking information. You're not seeking a job, you're seeking information. You speak to manager, somebody that's actually, running the business or the organization. And one of the things you have to consider when you're doing that as well, go small, not big, because when you go to the big business, you do not get an opportunity to speak to the people who are in charge. Small is better. So that's why sometimes just walking around your local community shops, you'll be able to build on that social capital, have those informational interviews, and that's when you'll start finding all those connections that flow on. So go speak to that manager, say to them, what does this job entail? How many staff members do you have here? What's the environment like? And start to recognize those things, write all of that stuff down. And a lot of the time, those people will say to you, hey, you know what? If you want to bring them in and see what it's like, then by all means. And the next time you go there, you take your person with you and you introduce them, let them introduce themselves and have a conversation, speak about that common ground, start creating that relationship, have that opportunity, do that time there, see what that experience is like, and then move on from there and see if there is some further relationships that are kind of connecting in, and whether it's going to make sense for your person. I'm hoping that I answered that.
John's asked a question, which I almost think is a bit of a Dorothy Dixer. Thank you, John. I'd like to answer John's, Lauren, what you consider Francis's question. I think one of the things interesting about that question about if a job seeker is isolated and lacking motivation to engage in the community and community groups, one of the interesting things about social capital is social capital is based on trust and mutuality. And if you have someone that is isolated and clearly lacking the motivation to engage in the broader community, what needs to happen is you need to develop a relationship with the individual as the employment person. You have to develop that relationship of trust and mutuality, and from that relationship, you then use your social capital, your connections in the community to provide an entree to the community, or for the participant or the job seeker to engage with the community through your network. And by doing that, what happens, and particularly Lauren mentioned informational interviews, when they can have, using your social capital, you can have a conversation, or the individual can have a conversation with people in your network. They then start to develop capital of their own. They then start to build trust in the activity, and it's a step-by-step process of building their social capital off the back of your social capital. And that's how most of us have developed our social capital as kids. We've developed it off our parents, friends who know someone who probably gave us that job while we were in school. My first job in school, my first 3 jobs in school, were working at a mechanical engineering shop, in the shop, building engines, etc., for race cars and this sort of stuff. And that was a friend of my father who owned an engineering business, and he gave me all those jobs every school holiday. So what was simply happening was that I was building social capital by leveraging my father's social capital. And that's what we do as employment people, is where a client is isolated, we can start to leverage our capital to allow them the opportunity to grow their own capital. Okay? I think that answers your question, John. If it doesn't, I'm sure you'll talk to me later on. Lauren, want to answer Francis's question?
Yeah, sure. So I was reading your question, Francis, and, I can try to give you an idea, but, if you do need any further help with it, we do actually offer support in that kind of thing. We do customized employment for clients, and so we can actually help to tailor it for your grandkids. Otherwise, you could also consider the college as well if you'd wanting to do it yourself. But Look, I think the difficulty with that is that you're saying that one of your grandkids, they've finished and they're going through TAFE, but it's not likely to lead directly to work. Well, my question I have for you is, does the TAFE course actually relate to what your grandchild actually wants to achieve? So, what is their goal ultimately, and what is their plan to reach that goal? So I do a little bit of work around self-determination. And one of the things that you could probably look at is the SDLMI model. And this model is actually designed to help young people become self-determined in their pathway to finding employment, and in other goals as well. So it does also relate into academic and social aspects too. But what you can do is you can actually sit down with your grandchild and you can discuss the options, and you can think about all the different steps that it would take to get to where it is that they want to go. And then you need to start working with your social capital or expanding on your social capital to then find that information or to find a mentor. For myself, I've used my social capital to be able to get in contact with someone from one of the universities to find out more information on how a client of mine can actually move into theatre. Now, this particular client that I'm working with, they did year 12, but they didn't do the VCAL and they skipped that part. And so, for them, they're sort of thinking, well, how do I then apply to go to university because I want to do theatre? There's always other options. There's always other avenues. And by simply using my social capital, I've been able to have conversations that have then given me the different options that are available. They've given me connections, people that I can then speak to, that I can call up, I can find information. Those people are then happy to speak to me because it really is just a simple phone call. And most people do actually want to help. So where to start? I would probably start by not focusing on the job part. I would focus on the steps. So I would look at what steps are available for your person or for your grandchild, and then start working through those steps. And, I think the other thing you have to remember too is that when you're young, do you know what you really want to do? Not necessarily. Sometimes it's about having opportunities to experience things. And that's where leveraging on your social capital, their social capital, the people around you social capital, you can get them those experiences. Because like I said in my talk, people with disabilities, they learn the best hands-on in those environments, seeing what it's like, experiencing it, understanding it. And, again, they're expanding on those social capital. They're building the relationships. There's people who are in that role who say, oh, you know what? I can help you. Let's work together.
Can I add to that and suggest that one of the starting points as the high-functioning grandkids are finishing school in TAFE, my suggestion would be that if you looked at the basic entry point into the discovery process where you start to explore skills, interests and likes, that may give you a better understanding of where you would then consider, okay, what type of work environments do we need to explore using something like an informational interview? Because often when people choose a TAFE course or a university course, it's because, sometimes it's because all their friends are going there, or sometimes because it's something they go, oh, I want to do that. But in actual fact, they don't have a clear understanding of what's involved in that particular job. So this is where the process of stepping back a little bit and going, okay, you said you wanted to go to TAFE because this is what you wanted to do. What about that actually interests you? And what you may discover is that whilst the TAFE course points at a certain career or job, only 10% of what it points at is the things that interest them. And what you've got to do for the process of then using the information interviews and the basic aspects of discovery is work out where does that 10% become 80 or 90%. right? And that's the process that we work with, John and Lauren and our staff work with everybody. You know, it's great if someone says they want to be an astronaut, but you're not going to be an astronaut if you live in Australia. So what is it about being an astronaut that attracts them to being an astronaut? And when you start to drill down, you discover that it isn't actually putting the suit on and going to the moon. It's an actual fact they want to peer at the stars. Well, guess what? Peering at the stars can be achieved in a number of different ways, none of which require you to leave the planet. So there are ways of doing it, but you've got to step back a little bit, and that's what Lauren is referring to here.
Yeah, and that's a really good way of looking at it, especially because most people will actually go to uni and they'll do all of their studies and all that hard work, and then they get to the end and they'll kind of go, oh, I don't think this is actually what I wanted to do, you know, which it seems absurd, but it's generally what happens. And, you know, that's why taking these steps initially before you even think about that kind of, you know, going to uni and doing certificates and all that kind of thing, it is really crucial, you know, and it's going to save you a lot of valuable time. And, you know, it also means that your person will thrive in their studies and in their environments because they will have meaning, and they'll have that passion that will be really driving them because, you know, like Dr. Smith said, they'll sort of choose something because, oh, yeah, all my friends are doing it, but your friends aren't always going to be around. So, you know, what is that other meaning for you? What is it that's driving you to actually do this? Finding that first is such an important thing. So, yeah, again, we can help you with that. You can actually learn about it yourself through our college. But, yeah, it's a really good way of looking at things. Yep, so moving on, just finally, because I don't think there's any more questions there. No, I think we're all caught up. But if you do have any other questions, feel free to type them in and we'll try to answer them before we finish. So this is just a little bit about CDERP. Let's see if I can move my little camera thing. I can't. So CDERP, we're about improving the evidence base for disability employment practice within Australia, working with like-minded practitioners and researchers. You know, we want to improve the evidence base and we want to change policy, we want to change practice, and we want to improve on opportunities and understanding of people with disabilities in employment. I don't know if Dr. Smith wants to add anything to that.
No, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Okay, and some of the things that we actually offer through CDERP, so we have the Work First Individual Employment. So that's what I was talking about. We do actually work with clients. For us, working with the clients, it's something that we only just started fairly recently, but it's because, you know, we realize that we really need to have that hands-on approach to see what people go through. We need to be able to also provide examples for organisations of how they can work with clients and how they can achieve this as a business model for themselves. You know, one of the things that's come out of it for us as well is that we've got people who are going through the CDERP college who ultimately are going to end up working for themselves, and they're going to be practicing and going through this same experience. Well, we're able to guide them through that because we're doing it ourselves. We also offer the Work First mental health services. So we do provide counselling. We also provide employment counselling. We know that this is one of the areas that really falls down for people. It's about having those resources available to your person, helping them to be a part of their environment and helping them to communicate. We've got the Work First Inclusive Corporations, which this is working with the organisation. So if you are a part of an organisation and you'd like to know more, that's where you need to go. You can find that on our website and we'll be able to provide a little bit more about that. We have the CDERP College, which that has all of our modules up there. So these are all the different things that you need to follow when it comes to customized employment. And you can also do these in parts as well, and they are self-paced learning. So you don't have to do the entire of the process. You can actually just learn as you want to and just take it as you can. And it's good as well to try and practice it whilst you're learning it too. We also do research, which you can view some of our papers on our website. And we have consulting and training. So the consulting and training, we work in with individuals or we work in with organisations, and we help them to understand where they're at. So whether or not they are an inclusive organisation and what sort of training that they can receive to help them get to a point that, you know, they can achieve their ultimate outcome of actually becoming inclusive and diverse. So this is a bit about our work first individual employment. So it's customized employment delivered with fidelity. This is growing the local evidence and practice based on local and international evidence, supported with the input of international leaders in employment and individuals who are self-managed participants. So we are presently working with self-managed people. But we can guide others where we need to. You can find out more information again on our website, which we've got the Work First website there. And Plan Managed, thank you. So this is with our CDERP college. Once you actually go through and complete all the micro-credentials, you become CDERP certified, and you'll get a free overview of customized employment with the coupon, which I think I told you at the beginning. If you go to the files section, so you can see what it's like and use that coupon. It's valid for 7 days. And you'll also be able to find as well on our website, we have some of the organisations that we worked with where they'll have staff that have actually been certified. We also have our podcast, which is a free podcast. So you just got to pop on to Podbean. There's some really great information on there. So if you want to learn about some different subjects, it's quite broad. And we've interviewed some of the most, knowledgeable people when it comes to employment and disability. So go on there, have a look. We've also, and iTunes and Spotify as well. And with our webinar series in 2021, Dr. Smith, if you want to mention what we've got up and coming for 2021.
Yeah, sure. The webinar series we did this year, there were about 18 of them. They were live, which came complete with a whole range of technical difficulties when you're broadcasting live. But we interviewed experts in different areas of disability employment through the year. In the early part of next year, our series of webinars will also we'll be engaging with families, parents of kids with disabilities, and we'll be talking about their expectations. We have some more webinars coming around organisational change and transformation. And I think I should know this because I wrote the schedule. Oh, here it is on one of the many hieroglyphic hand notes. So the first webinar we're going to do in the third week in January 2021 is around employment skills. In other words, the sort of skills you need to have if you're going to deliver employment services within either ADE, social enterprise, or DES. These are the sort of skills that we know that individuals need based on our experience of working inside organisations and the feedback we get from individuals we work with, and also the expanding evidence base here and overseas. We're doing another one, which is we're going to look at the idea of what the future of work looks like in the 2021 environment, because clearly COVID has changed what employment looks like, and we'll look at the impact of employment and where employment is likely to be. We'll be doing one on the school leaver employment support program, another one on workplace counselling and post-placement support. And what else? I think that's all I have on my list for the first 3 months of next year. So,
if you want to, keep up to date, go to our website and register for the newsletter. So then you'll be in the know of when everything is happening and the webinars coming up for next year, so you won't miss anything. So I know that going into this busy time of Christmas and everything, we start to forget. So this will give you a nice little reminder come January what's happening. So this is just a little bit on our Work First Inclusive Corporations. It's a fresh new approach to disability inclusion in the workplace, a step change in disability employment. Dr. Smith, as this is your point here, you might want to explain this one because you'll probably explain it better than I can.
I'll do that, and if you like, I know that you have an appointment to go to, which I think you need to leave for now. I'll finish off the last informational slide, so thank you, Lauren.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, so turn your camera and microphone off before you leave. Okay, everyone, the Work First Inclusive Corporations program is a program we developed in response to large corporations that were talking to us and basically saying we'd love to employ people with a disability, but we don't know how to. So at the time when the first of the large groups, which is a North American multinational that has significant investments in Australia, approached us, I was actually working at Cornell at the time. So I was able to look at some of the practices they use in the US around making large corporations inclusive. And we've adopted a lot of the evidence base from the US, a lot of the research in the US and in Australia. We put together a program for large corporations. And the starting point of this particular program is, in actual fact, we audit the organisation for its practices, its policies, its job descriptions and things like that. And the logic behind that is that, to give you an idea, if you write a job description or a position description in the office in Perth for something that's happening in a mine 2,000 kilometres away, the likelihood is that what happens on the ground 2,000 kilometres away doesn't really match the position description that was written by someone in HR in Perth. So what we do is we actually physically look at what's happening in the field in that particular role and see how it matches to the job description. So it's about changing the organisation's culture and philosophy and about embedding the employment staff in the organisation. The organisation becomes aware of the methodology that disability employment people use to identify suitable candidates. So what happens, of course, is they develop trust in the process, so that the service provider then is able to go skirt the normal recruitment process and present to the organisation suitable candidates, which they then support into the role in the organisation. So that's kind of the brief version of what that particular program is. And the final one, Lauren was talking about the overview. As she said, in the files section, you can access this using the code that's sitting there. If you don't get the code written down, by all means reach out to us and we'll give you that code, and that'll allow you to actually have a look at what discovery looks like, get the overview of the program. So I think that was the last slide Lauren had. Nope, this is the last slide. So on behalf of Lauren and behalf of all of us at the Centre, thank you for participating today. We know it's probably that time of the year we're all getting a little bit tired of staring at webinars and podcasts and computer screens. I know I am. But thank you, everyone. We're here to provide a service to the community, to government and organisations, and we do that across the multiple levels we're talking about. I will say that one of the things when Lauren talked about us, the delivering of services to individuals, that's something that was always on our agenda. And what's prompted us to do that, of course, was COVID coming along. And then, of course, the number of requests we get from families to say, look, where can I find someone I can get decent employment services from? So it prompted us to actually maybe bring it forward a little bit to start this year, which is great from our point of view, because it does mean that we're still getting our hands dirty in the sense that we're out there doing the work that we're teaching people how to do. Importantly, what it does is it provides us with instant feedback of what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be changed. So it helps us build the evidence base. And that evidence that we collect from the work we do, feeds directly back to changes in practices which go fed straight through to the NDIS. We have a very healthy relationship with the agency that allows us to feed evidence and information to them and have an influence on the direction of employment policy through the NDIS. So, that's a really great bonus for us. But I will say to you that all the organisations that we work with globally in research, they all quietly run employment services as well, because that's the best way to learn what's going on, is by being out there in the field doing it. If you want to explore employment with us, John Adams runs the employment program. By all means, reach out, use that email address there, the employment@cderp.com, or for that matter, ring us up and we'll absolutely talk to you. John's just put the webinar dates have been added to the document section. So John's working in the background, so that's in the file section. I'm about to finish, so we'll leave this running for a couple of minutes if you want to have a look. But if you don't have that opportunity, by all means, reach out to us and we'll give you that information or anything you need. Thank you, everyone. It's been great having you here with us today. Much appreciated. You guys have a good day.